What's up guys, Gabriel Varga here. Tonight, per request, we're going to sit down and talk about my championship belts, my 6 pro world titles, and the stories behind each of them, what it took to win them, specific points that I remember which were, funny stories, ridiculous stories. We're going to talk about it all. So we're going to go in a chronological order, and the first pro belt I ever won back in 2011 was this lovely WKN belt. Now, this was my first pro world title, as I said, and I think at that time my record was something, I can't even actually remember my record. I think I had around 7 or 8 fights, but I was a very accomplished amateur athlete, so they gave me this title shot. But I don't know how much faith WKN actually had in me in winning this belt. They sent over a guy who was 50, his record was 50-2, and he was from France. He was actually the first guy I ever fought who was taller than me. He was 6'1", and I was actually pretty lucky for my first pro world title actually having it at home, because travel, whether you agree with me or not, I really stand adamant that it takes its toll on you when you're doing that travel, when you're leaving your city or your country. So being able to do my first pro world title at home was amazing. And this belt was actually won on a series of cards that my dad hosted called the Quest for the Title. It was events that he basically created so I could have a shot at the best guys in the world and sort of build up through my amateur career. Now, pro fighting was officially illegal in my city at the time, so we had to go up to native land and we were able to host this event. So let's talk about the nerves for this first fight. Like, was anything massively different? And at the time going into this fight, I believe I had one really terrible illegitimate loss, which came in a tournament in New York. It was just, oh my gosh, so bad, the decision. So I was feeling pretty much that I was undefeated. I was undefeated as an amateur. I'd never had a real loss as a professional, and I was feeling pretty darn good about my skill. So going into this fight, even though my opponent was 50-2, I was really feeling confident. And I remember doing an interview with the local news, and they were asking me like, wow, this guy's record is pretty daunting. Like, how are you feeling? And I was with all confidence able to say, like, I'm gonna win this belt. Now, there's always a funny story with every fight you have, and my funny story with this one is the guys actually came over and they landed, and we were at the rules meeting, and we started talking about the rules. I'd always done modified Muay Thai. So that basically meant there was no elbows. It was kind of like that K1 Max rules back in the beginning. You weren't throwing elbows, but you could clench for a good solid 5 seconds, and you were allowed to throw your opponent. And I don't know what happened. There must have been a language barrier. Somehow they were under the impression no sweeps and no throws allowed whatsoever. And a main part of my game plan for this guy was to catch, because he was a southpaw, to catch his kick and to throw him down. He was tall, so he was a little bit less, I'd say, stable and not maybe as strong as me, so I had the plan to really roughhouse him around. So we ended up finding a middle ground. They didn't want any sweeps allowed, but I was still allowed to throw him. It's kind of funny dealing with that last minute. You think you would just have the rules sorted out, but WKN, I think it was Oriental rules they were saying, but it was different than ISK, which I had previously fought for. But anyway, this fight, I won all 5 rounds. Decisively. I was just able to throw him down very often. He didn't hit as hard as I thought he would, because when I watch videos he was knocking guys out, but I was actually able to withstand all his shots and just more or less use technique when I needed to, and then bully him when I needed to. Bully him with those throws. I think I threw him down probably 10-15 times in the fight, like to the point where it was getting so easy that I was actually feeling a little bad that I wasn't giving the crowd that push for the knockout, because I just didn't need to go for it. But either way, it was my first world title. It was a really good feeling. Very nice to have that first one out of the way. Even though I'd won amateur world titles, they didn't mean the same as this. So spectacular win. I was super happy with it. All right, next let's move on to my WKF world title. Now this one came just a short 6 months later. It was actually the follow-up fight to that one, so I had back-to-back world title fights, which was amazing. And for this one, I actually got to do my first trip ever to Europe, over in Vienna, Austria, late 2011, and my opponent was actually a guy named Roy Tan, who I actually knew. It was the first time I'd ever fought an opponent where they gave me the name, and I went, oh, I know that guy. And he was actually well known and a little bit famous because he was in the promotion, or the division they called K1 Youth, which was basically designed to obviously develop fighters who are under 19 to make them K1 stars. And Roy fought one of the best guys. He was a Japanese fighter who was sort of Masato's protege, and he didn't win against him, but he did a pretty good job. And just going into the fight knowing like, oh, I'm fighting somebody who has fought on K1 on that world stage was, you know, a little intimidating. But again, my brother and I, we game planned, we looked at the videos, and I knew that I could beat him. It was just a matter of being able to train really hard and put all the strategy into place and perform fight night. But for this title, I had two odd things that happened, and the first one was one day I was walking inside just the entrance of my home, and somebody had left a hammer on the ground, and I stepped on that hammer, and like in between my toes, the skin there caught the edge of it where you pull nails out, and it actually split. It split pretty deep. So, and that was only like 2 or 3 weeks before the fight. So I had, I think, 4 or 5 days where I couldn't even walk. And for me, that was one of the first injuries that I had had that close to a fight, especially a big fight like this. But I did what I could. I remember doing, you know, the bike with the arms to stay fit, and just resting this as much as I could, as quickly as I could. And then I think after 4 or 5 days, I was back in the gym with my foot all bandaged, just boxing, trying to keep my weight off one foot, but train on the other. But either way, I went to Vienna feeling really good shape, but mentally just wrecked for some reason. I don't know why. I just went there, and I remember sitting on the plane just feeling like, shoot, everything feels wrong right now. And I don't know if that was just because it was my first trip over to Europe, or you know what the circumstances were, but just being so nervous and feeling like everything, even though the fight camp had gone really well, everything feeling off. And then on top of that, it was a massive trip to Vienna. We got there, it was my first trip to Europe. Like I said, I wasn't used to, you know, how do you deal with that jet lag going to the east? I'd been over to the west going towards Asia, but I had never been that direction, and it just threw us for a loop. My brother and I, we got there I think 2 or 3 days before the fight, and the recovery and the jet lag just wrecked us. We were waking up at 3 in the morning, falling asleep at like 4 in the afternoon, and then waking up around 9, and then getting back to sleep at 10 p.m. and then waking up again the next morning at 3 a.m. and you're just all over the place. And yeah, you just, oh my gosh. But the crazy stories don't stop there. I have more for this one. We're over there, and this was actually an interesting venue. It was an amateur event, like a big amateur event, where lots of people from different surrounding countries around Austria were coming to compete. And they had 3 pro kickboxing fights to sort of finish off the whole card as a big feature for everybody to sit and watch. And I was one of those fights, and we got there, and I didn't bring any gloves, and I didn't bring any wraps. And it was legitimately about 2 hours before the fight, and the guys were like, okay, go and throw your wraps and your gloves on and start warming up. And I was, you know, I've been on a lot of cards before. I'd never been able to provide my own gloves and provide my own wraps, and I was just like telling the guy, like, I don't have anything. What are we gonna do here? So he sent my brother and I off. He's just like, okay, go and ask somebody if you can borrow their gloves. We'll try and get some wraps together for you. And long story short, basically I ended up borrowing a pair of 10-ounce twins from somebody who had already fought. Couldn't find any wraps, so we just threw the 10-ounce gloves on, ran and jumped into the ring after the warm-up with no wraps. And I just remember squeezing my hands so hard in the fight to make sure that I didn't throw and break them. Now, Rory was a tough opponent, but you know, this is the first time I realized that the skill level difference, or just at least where I was, because you know, I'd seen this guy before. I went, oh, he's pretty good. And then I went in and he wasn't an issue. I beat him up. I got the 3rd round TKO. And then for one of the first times I got to, you know, after the fight, spend 3 or 4 days in Vienna and actually see Europe, and it was great. And I got to take home this lovely belt with me. All right, world title number 3, big one, massive jump in my career. Basically one of the biggest belts you can win in the world for kickboxing right now, glory. And this was 2015, so this was 4 years later. I had 4 years without title shots and managed to work my way up to one of the biggest kickboxing promotions in the world and get after their belt. For this one, we actually got the fight in Dubai. And the interesting part about this fight was how long it took to actually get on this card. This card was delayed and delayed and delayed, basically because at the time, Glory was having massive financial issues. So in 2014, I believe it was in June, I won the contender tournament, you know, 2 fights, 4 fighters in one night. So I won that event in June, was sort of expecting in October or November to actually get a fight for this belt, which, you know, that winning that 4-man tournament earned me the fight to challenge for this. And I knew whoever I fought was going to be absolutely amazing, because at the time there were 3 or 4 guys who were right around that top level. But yeah, it just kept getting pushed back, you know. October turned into November, November to December, and then until I believe it got pushed back to something like February. And then I remember finally around the beginning of March, I finally saw this poster. It actually says on the back here what the date was. April 3rd, yeah. So it was around the beginning of February. I saw the poster, I saw my face on it. They didn't even tell me that I, you know, was confirmed for the card. And I went, yes, finally I get to fight for my title, because I was actually really concerned that Glory might go under and I might never get my shot at this belt, which I had worked so hard for so long. So of course going to Dubai was just, you know, kind of a gong show trip. I think from Victoria all the way there took 30 plus hours. 30 hours of travel, and I don't really sleep on flights, especially when you're weight cutting and you're uncomfortable, and yeah, it's just basically get there and fall asleep as quick as you can. Now, I don't specifically remember any really crazy stories from Dubai beforehand. I remember, you know, I pretty much stayed in the hotel room. I remember one morning waking up and there was this weird red glow outside, and I opened up the drapes, like really, really red, and it was actually a sandstorm outside. So that motivated me even more to stay in my hotel room. I didn't want to go out and be breathing sand into my lungs before I competed. So I basically just sent my brother and my buddy Craig, my other cornerman, out to get food for me. I just stayed in the hotel the whole time. My opponent was Mosab Amrani. He was the #1 fighter in the featherweight division at the time, and a scary guy just came out and tried to just kill whoever he was fighting. I went in with a really good game plan, you know, survived round 1, started to go a little faster in round 2. I knew round 3, 4, 5 I could really take over, and that's what I did. I ended up winning 4 of the 5 rounds and winning this beautiful, beautiful belt. Definitely one of the, I'd say, top 3 fights, sort of the highlight of my career. This is one of those belts that defines your career, you know, having a Glory belt. Not many people can say they've done that, so extra, extra special for me. All right, moving on to belt number 4. This is Hero Legends belt. They actually make a pretty darn nice belt. Like, I was pretty impressed when I saw this. It's pretty substantial. Kind of looks like a Terminator belt to me. So I had an opportunity to go to China and fight because Glory wasn't putting on enough events where I was getting to compete as often as I wanted. So I had, I think, 3 Chinese promotions reach out to me, and I ended up going with these guys just because they seemed the most upfront, they seemed the most excited, and they really wanted to promote me. They actually put posters of me all over China and sent me pictures of these posters, and I could see, like, man, I'm on the front of the billboard. Right beside the highway. And Sanchai was on this card, and they gave me front billing as well. I went, wow, these guys are really motivated to have me on this card, so I'm going to sign with them. It was a good decision. I mean, unfortunately, the promotion, as far as I know, isn't putting on big events anymore, but I got 2 fights with these guys. They treated me really well, and I was actually really impressed with them. This trip was actually a special one, not so much because of the fight. I mean, the fight went really well, but it was actually one of our favorite travel trips. They flew us to an island off the south of China called Hainan, and they put us up at this beautiful 5-star resort. We didn't even know where we were going. We just, you know, we flew there, somebody started driving us, and we was like, we don't know if we're staying at somebody's house, if they're putting us up on a dive. And we got there, and it's like this beautiful 5-star resort right on the beach. Amazing restaurants throughout. Probably the nicest place I've ever stayed. Oh, definitely one of the nicest places. Not maybe the nicest, but one of the nicest spots I've ever stayed in my entire life. Now, there were some ridiculous stories, of course, with this. Like, they wanted to do a lot of pre-fight promotion, videos of you facing off, because it was obviously on big Chinese TV networks. So they had us doing the most ridiculous things. Like, we had to go out in boats and drive around. They were getting all this B-roll footage of us zooming around, and then we had to go up and down the beach. The Chinese team, because it was sort of China versus other countries, they were going around up and down the beach on ATVs, on 4-wheelers, and we were just sitting there watching them for probably like an hour, just getting this basic B-roll shots, which they probably use like 60 seconds of in the actual live TV event. I remember getting pretty frustrated about that. Like, oh, just let me go back, and I'm cutting weight and I'm not really in the mood for this, but you know, you do it. Oh, another really funny story on this event. Just, you never know when things are just going to come up that you're not expecting. You don't want to let them throw you off. And this was something that could have really thrown me off. I got to the weigh-ins and I'm looking out and I'm like, who's that? Oh, geez. And it was Core Hemmers, who is basically finds the talent and sets up fights for Glory. And I was still signed with Glory, and he's one of the head guys, and I didn't know anybody was going to be there. And they're like, oh yeah, we were in Thailand and we decided to come over and watch you fight. So I'm thinking, wow, no pressure. You guys came all the way over here to watch me fight. You know, I had lost the glory belt, but they were basically scouting me to see if I was ready to have a rematch with Adam Chuck. So geez, like last minute, no warning that they were coming, just, oh, we're here, no big deal. Something that you learn throughout the years is you just have to roll with the punches, so to speak. Things get thrown at you that you're not expecting, something like that. Like having the main guy for glory show up to watch you could really throw off a lot of people, but you just go, you know what, it's my opponent, it's me. He's the guy who can hurt me. All the people in the crowd, they don't really matter. It doesn't matter who shows up. Like it's a celebrity shows up, your girlfriend shows up, something like that. Like, you know, just remember your training, focus on the fight, focus on your opponent, and focus on getting that win. And everything, at least in my experience, turns out well if you just ignore all the other things on the side that don't really matter. Don't let those little things get into your head. They're inconsequential. We had a great time after the fight. We you know, we're at the resort. We got to play ping pong, go for bike rides through the countryside, eat amazing food. You know, the only downside is the massive trip back. Anytime you travel over to Europe or Asia, the downside is always the travel time. It's always, especially to China, ends up being somehow from here, by the time you leave till you get there, at least 30 hours. And it's just always a bit of a like just a little slap in the face. You get back, you're exhausted. But at least I had this to bring back with me, so it always makes it a little easier coming back with a new belt. All right, world title number 5, glory belt number 2, and this one was really cool for me because I wasn't actually the first Canadian to win a glory belt. That was Joseph Valtellini, but I was the first Canadian to win 2. Also, I believe the first of any glory fighter to win the contender tournament, and then a belt, and then another belt. So yeah, I just was really happy with this. Plus, it was a rematch. I lost the belt initially to Sergey Adamchuk. Very, very close fight. This one was also a very close fight. It was just, you know, I got a knockdown, which won me the fight. It was just a 1-point difference, I believe, or one or 2-point difference, depending on which judge's scorecard you were on. This fight was 2016, so a year after I won the other glory belt. It was in Virginia, down in the States. And there was nothing too crazy about the trip down there as far as I can remember. Oh yeah, one of the funny stories about this belt leading up to it, I've talked about this in seminars before. You just have to be aware and not be thrown off by random things that can happen. So we were going down in the elevator to the lobby. We're going to get the transport to the venue. And as we're going down in the elevator, Adam Chuck, after we get in, comes in as well. So you're just kind of standing there awkwardly next to your opponent. It just makes for an awkward situation. You don't want to let it throw you off, but you're kind of like looking at each other, sizing each other up, but you don't want to seem, you know, too aggressive about it. It's just a funny situation. I was just able to let it sort of roll off. No big deal, whatever. And then we get down to the lobby and we're sitting around waiting for our transport, and there's nobody coming. And there was some mix-up. I don't even know what it was, but we're just waiting and waiting and waiting, kind of getting stressed out, like, shoot, is somebody gonna come and pick us up? And eventually they did, but things were running late, and you know, at least I was the main event on that fight card. But when things are thrown off, when your schedule is thrown off, when you're trying to get somewhere and do something, especially as important as fighting for this, it's just really not cool when you're waiting around. And again, that's just something you have to be able to roll with the punches and just let those sort of things just slide off. And don't let them bother you, and just sort of stay calm and just put all your focus and intent on just winning that belt. Now this fight, the thing that sticks out of my mind in particular was, you know, Sergey and I had very different styles. They clashed, they didn't work well together. He's a very awkward sort of fighter, especially when he's with me. But I remember from this fight, not so much being injured from his techniques, like my head was fine. I got a cut from him because he headbutted me. Again, and my body was fine, but the legs, he kept throwing this weird sort of switch kick, and I don't know if he was trying to target my leg and kept missing, but he kept kicking my hip. And during the fight, it was feeling fine, no big deal, but then after, it just blew up. So much swelling, and it was so painful. I remember after we got back to the venue, it was already really hard to walk. And I got into the bath, first time I think ever after a fight where I got into a bath, filled it full of ice, and I was like shaking. I couldn't stop shaking. Number one, because of the cold, and number two, because of the pain and I guess the physical exertion of going through a full 5-round fight. But it didn't feel good. Like always, I always spend a couple extra days at the location down in Virginia in this case, so I don't have to travel back the next day, because you never know what kind of pain you're going to be in. And it's nice to see the world. Once you've traveled somewhere on somebody else's dollar, you might as well stick around and see that place and take advantage of it. That's a big benefit to this sport, is the travel and getting to see the world. So anyway, by the time I think I woke up the following day, it was even hard to fit like tight pants on. I had to wear stretchy shorts, and it was Virginia. It was, I think, like 42 degrees Celsius, so it was just boiling down there. And obviously my cornermen wanted to see as much as they could, so I was going along with them as much as I could, but I couldn't really walk more than 100 or 200 meters because of the pain. We went to check out a baseball game, and I just remember being miserable. It was so hot, and I was just aching, throbbing, and I had a headache, not from getting hit, but just from the fact that my leg was throbbing so bad in the heat. So I remember that being a pretty unpleasant post-fight experience, even though we got some good food, and it was cool seeing somewhere else. You know, I wasn't feeling super fit and healthy after, and that injury lingered for a month after. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would just get this nausea, this sort of like, oh, do I have to run to the washroom and I'm gonna throw up, just because the pain was so extreme, and that it was just such a weird spot. I'd never been really kicked there. You can take, you know, lots of low kicks because you're used to them, but getting kicked somewhere else, it's crazy how you're not used to it, how much more it hurts. But again, you know, it's worth it. It's always worth it. I don't look back and regret any of it. Winning the belt is always the priority, and I'm super happy I won it and super proud of that victory, especially because Adam Chuck was just on a tear then. After he beat me, he was moving up in weight class, beating guys, coming back down, defending the belt, moving up in weight class on short notice, beating guys, and then I was the first guy in glory to give him a loss. And my last world title for the moment that I have, world title number 6, is my Bellator belt, and I currently still hold this one. I'm the champion for the division. Getting to sign with Bellator, even though leaving Glory, it was kind of bittersweet, because I'm like, oh, I'm leaving Glory. I wanted to move to Bellator because I'd heard such good things, but Glory was great to me. These guys were just offering more and better, and I thought, you know, I'm already giving Glory so much, but they're not willing to go up and the amount that of the purse they're willing to offer, and these guys were doing so much more, willing to offer so much more, so it just made sense. But the main reason I wanted to go to Bellator was to get a fight with Kevin Ross, and that's what this belt was. It was a fight against him. I'd been looking to get a fight against him, I think, for over a decade. There'd been talk about us fighting, and he was just as excited as me. And yeah, getting to win this belt against him was just amazing, because he was the face of Muay Thai, and I remember coming up before I was pro, knowing his name and just being like, whoa, he's the man. Everybody knows Kevin, and everybody wants to fight Kevin or be like Kevin. So being able to fight him, especially for such an amazing title, for such an amazing promotion, was just spectacular. Now this one was 2018 July in Rome, which was just spectacular as well. I mean, going to Italy, I've been there so many times, it's almost like my fight home now. I think I've actually possibly fought the most in my pro career in Italy. So yeah, being over there and getting to have the fight against him in such a spectacular city. I mean, Rome has the Colosseum, and it's such a fight city, fight capital with all the history it has. So it was just amazing. And I learned my lesson, and had made previous mistakes going to Europe and not getting enough time there. So I went a whole week early, really got to adjust to that time, the time difference. I had a really solid training camp. I knew that Kevin was going to be a spectacular opponent, and I really wanted to be prepared, so I didn't really cut any corners. We got put up in this nice hotel just on the outside of Rome, so it was quiet. There was a pool outside. There was not a bunch of noise. It felt like kind of being in like a little country hotel, which was really nice because it just kind of took the edge off that normal fight week. The weight cut went pretty easy because it was the summer there, and it was hot, and I was able to go outside and just go for a jog. And I'll talk about that in a future video, how I like to cut weight, and one of my favorite parts is just throwing that sauna suit on and getting that last workout in before the fight and just sweating the weight off. I feel the best doing that, but I'll address that in more detail in the future. But the weight cut went well, and I went into the fight, you know, nervous because this is a fight I really wanted to win. I felt like I could win it, but just you know, having so much anticipation and so much hype behind the fight gives you those extra nerves. But you know, even with all that, I still felt pretty darn solid. I got some last minute nerves, but that's just natural. Now, the result of the fight, you know, first round KO. I don't know if anybody had ever really KO'd Kevin like that. Was I expecting it? Definitely not. Do I think that it would happen again? Like I'll just KO him every time? Absolutely not. He is an amazing opponent. It just happened to be one of those things, you know, I clipped him and it just didn't go well for him. But you know, him and I both want a rematch, and we're going to really work. We've actually talked already, really work on making that happen either this year or next year. So if that's a fight that you're actually excited about and you want to see that rematch, make sure you let me know, let him know, and definitely let Bellator know, because they're the guys ultimately that can make that happen. Yeah, it's really special to me because number one, I hold it right now. Number two, I've defended it a number of times. And number three, I really like fighting for Bellator. So every time I can put on a good fight for them and continue to hold this, it just means that much more to me. So 6 world titles, you guys got to see those tonight. You got to hear about them, little stories behind them. Be sure I'm coming for number 7 and number 8, and I'm going to keep trying to win more and more world titles. How many is enough? It's probably just is never enough. I'm always going to keep driving forward. That's probably one of the things that makes a lot of champions just extra special. They always want to shoot for something further. They're never satisfied with what they have. So I will continue to defend that belt. I will be looking to possibly get something like an ISK belt, and I'll be maybe even in the future at some point seeing if I can get a fight with Ryzen or with 1FC. You know, who knows what the future holds, but definitely more belts. I know that I want more, and I'm coming for more. I hope you guys enjoyed, really enjoyed getting to hear those stories, the behind the scenes things. Those are the ones that you normally don't get privy to. Being able to share that with you guys is really special, because whenever I get to hear about the behind the scenes stories and big title fights, other ones that I'm not involved in, I always go, wow, I just wish that I could hear the stories behind all of them, that I could be behind the scenes for all these world title fights. I mean, the fights are great, but it's great seeing all the other stuff. So it's really nice to share with you guys. 4 videos, I can't remember who asked for this one, but thank you for the suggestion, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you guys have a request your own, like I said, I already have a full page that I have to get through, but I'm getting through them bit by bit. So if you have your own request, make sure you comment down below and let me know what that is. I will get to it at some point. Guys, be sure to get subscribed, like the video, and I'll see you back here soon for another episode.